Hey guys, it's Nate with City Life Wheels. I'm going to show you a brake job, walk you through the steps with tools that you could get at any store, and also some of the tools that I use to make it a little quicker. So when we start a brake job, first of all, when I drive this car down the road, I got a lot of shaky, grinding kind of noises. So my brake pedal actually shakes and pulses, and then I got this kind of sound, this grinding kind of sound. So if I were doing the brakes on this, if I got a grind, I can either take the rotors off, which I'll show you what those are in a minute, and get those resurfaced at a shop, or I'll replace those rotors and new brake pads, but I'll show you all that in a second. When we start a brake job, first of all, I'm gonna take this brake, this is where my brake fluid is. I'm gonna take the cap off the brake fluid so that this fluid can come up and down when I'm doing my brake job. I'll show you that in a second. All right, so a lot of these videos we've been showing you how to do different things on cars where they've been on lifts, but obviously in your own garage, your own shop, on the driveway, or wherever you are, out on the street, hopefully not in the middle of anywhere too crazy, but you're gonna be using these tools that you can get anywhere at AutoZone. You're gonna use a jack like this. This one is pretty big and hefty. You can get one for about $100 or less. That's a lot smaller. This will jack up the car, and then whenever you're working on these cars, you've gotta use a jack stand. You jack up the car on the frame that I had to show you in person sometime, but for now, I just wanted to point out these tools to make sure that you know you're using these and using them safely. Once you've jacked up the car, you're actually going to put the jack on the pinch rail on a car, which is right under here, and support yourself with the jack stand whenever you're working under a car. So we already started by lowering the car and taking the brake fluid cap off. And then the next step is we're going to take this caliper off. There's two bolts right here, top and bottom, then the bracket, and then we'll be able to take this rotor off. So I'm using a basic ratchet and socket. In a second, just to speed things up, I'm going to use an air ratchet, but you're obviously going to go over here, you're going to loosen your socket, or loosen the bolt, excuse me, and I'm going to take this thing out. Just two bolts there. Then I can take this caliper right off. Sometimes it's stubborn, kind of wiggles. Sometimes you have to use a screwdriver to kind of pry it out. But that's my brake caliper, and that squeezes these brake pads, and these are the brake pads right here. These brake pads for this one, like I said, we're just going to put these parts back on, but these brake pads are pretty thick. All right, I want to show you a brake pad that's worn out and a brake pad that's brand new, so you can see the difference. This is a brand new brake pad. This is a brake pad that's completely gone. A lot of brake shops or car shops will judge a brake pad by how much pad thickness is left, and they do it in percentages sometimes. You can actually see this metal part here, this thick part where my finger is the metal portion that holds the pad on, and this portion right here is how much is left, that little part sticking out of this brake pad itself. Okay, so this one is gone. Pretty much, you can see how thin it is right here compared to this part. This portion right here is the brake material. It's almost gone. This brand new one, you can compare the difference. This is the portion that holds the pad material, and this is how much is left, brand new. So that's 100%. This one's pretty much 5% or less and pretty much gone. So this is how you can gauge how much pad is left on a car. So this one I got to replace right now. If you look at this particular car right here, I take that pad off. Compared with a brand new pad, it's actually in pretty good shape. If you think this is new, and this one's about, maybe at least 50%, right? I got a lot of pad left in this one, so I'm not going to touch this. I might replace this brake job. I might do this pad and rotors if I got a lot of noise that's bothering me. But at this point, this is not a safety issue, so I can reuse these pads and put the rotors back on. Again, if I want to get rid of noise and pulsation and all that, I can do the pads and rotors. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to do it. So I took these pads out, slid them out. Notice I didn't let this caliper just hang here by this brake hose. You don't want to just let it hang. Sometimes you can use a bungee cord and wrap it up here, or a hanger if you don't have a bungee cord. But anywhere where you can set it so it's not hanging on that hose and it's not going to fall. And that one's staying pretty secure, so I'm going to leave that alone. Then I got two bolts in the back that are holding this bracket on. Then I'm going to take those two bolts off. I'm going to use, a lot of times these bolts are really, really tight. So I'm going to use a breaker bar. You don't want to use if you got a super tight bolt, a breaker bar doesn't have a ratcheting mechanism. It just breaks the bolt free. Versus a ratchet, it ratchets like this. You can actually hear the sound. If you a heavy, super tight bolt, if you use a ratchet, you're going to break the ratcheting mechanism in here. So you use a breaker bar, and I'm trying to get out of the way. Normally I'd be all up in this bolt, but I'm going to try to get out of the way. I'm going to pull hard, righty tighty, lefty loosey, and I'm going to keep positioning it until I get it loose. And now this one I had to tug on pretty hard before, but I've already got it loose. All right, so I got 2 bolts. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to zip them off real quick. And then I got my brake caliper off. All right. All right, so I'm going to take this rotor off. I call this Mini Thor. Got a lot of weight to it. If you use a regular old hammer, you'll never get it free. So you got to get something pretty beefy, a sledgehammer or something on some of these rotors, because you're going to have to hit it hard. We'll see how easy this one comes off. If I'm replacing this rotor, I can hit it anywhere because I'm going to ruin it, right? If I'm going to try to save this rotor, take it off for some reason, for some other reason, I can hit it right here. Like let's say I was going to take it to a machine shop and get this cleaned up and not replace it. I'm going to try to hit it here so that I'm not, and without hitting these studs, so that I don't ruin this surface. But for this sake, I'm going to replace this rotor. I'm going to hit it real hard, right? Yeah, I'm going to hit it. Ready? It's going to be loud. Big smack. Came right out. So I got my rotor off. I got a brand new one. I'm going to put the brand new one on. Pretend this is nice and shiny. Okay. I take something called Brake Clean. It's like a spray that you can get at any auto parts store. And with a clean rag, I'm going to wipe off the oil that's on a brand new rotor. Clean that off real good on both sides. And then if it's kind of flopping around on you, sometimes you can just put a lug nut on here to hold it so it doesn't move, just to hold it in place while you're trying to monkey with everything else. Now it's nice and firm. I've got a brand new rotor. And then this is my caliper. If you can see this piston's pushed out a little bit. What I'm going to use, you can use a big old C-clamp at home, or better tool is this thing, super cheap, maybe 10 bucks at the most. You can get it at AutoZone. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your pad, old pad, you set it in here, and I'm actually going to set it like this. So you can see how I got that set in there. And then I'm going to twist this, and you're going to notice this piston is going to push in, which is going to shove brake fluid all the way up to the master cylinder. Moving it nice and slow. If this is super hard to crank, you might need to use a C-clamp. That's the downside of this tool, is you don't have a lot of leverage to grab this thing. You don't have any way to turn it with a wrench. And this one is going all the way in, if you can see that. And you want to go until you can't turn it anymore, and you'll feel it all of a sudden. It'll get super snug and super tight, and you won't be able to go any further. And this should be pretty much flat with that surface right there where my thumb is. If you want to get fancy, you can use a tool like this. It just fell off on me. $50 tool. For most people in shops, they use them to move quick. Does the same kind of thing, but you get the idea. It pushes it in there and makes that caliper totally flat. Right there. So now my caliper is going to sit back over here for a second. I'm going to get my other stuff ready here. I'll show you this. Alright, so we got the brake caliper here. We're going to get it prepped to go back on the car. These are the slides. These need to move nice and smooth. If you ever have a slide that doesn't move, it's totally locked in place, you can eventually pull these out with the vice grips and some heat. clean them up, and if you can get them back in and they move, it'll work for a while. But a lot of times, if this is stuck in here, you got to replace this caliper because it'll just get stuck again even after you get it freed up. But if it's nice and smooth, that's a good sign. Keep the boot on there and pull that out. Wipe it clean from the old grease. There's grease on there that helps it make it slide. I got brake caliper grease, brake parts grease. Any color, doesn't have to be orange, can be black, gray, whatever. Nice thin coating all the way around it, not real thick. Slide it back in. You notice this one's got a little air in there. I can hold it till the air pops out. Eventually that'll work itself out. All right. Same thing with this one. Wipe it off. Quick thin coat. Slide it back in. Pinch it to let some air out. Make sure that boot covers over that bolt or the slide pin itself. Then I'm going to take this hardware here. I'm going to pop it off. It's on here pretty good. Some brake pads come with new hardware. Go ahead and use it if you got it. Take this hardware off. Take a wire brush, $2 Harbor Freight store, and you're just trying to clean that groove right there where that hardware used to sit. Just kind of get all that rust out of there. Otherwise, these pads are going to start sticking in this place, and then you've got trouble when the brake pads when they start to wear unevenly. You can actually do a brand new brake pads and rotors, and if you don't do some of these steps, you're going to be ended up doing this again in a couple months, as these pads will stick in here and not be able to move freely where they need to. Same with these slides. So I don't have to work all day at that, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that to the other side. Then I get my brand new brake pads. Again, pretend that I got brand new brake pads here. And I'm going to lube it up right on these points. I don't want to get brake lube on the pad itself, just on these little tips where it's going to slide in those spots. You can do it here. Some people like to put it on the outside. That's fine too. Okay, I'm going to lay it face down so I'm not getting that goo on everything. You could also just put it in here, right? That's an easier way to do it for some people. They like it, whatever you want to do. But the points where the pad tips go into the hardware on the caliper right here, they need to be lubed up. All right. Yes, some people say you don't need to do this. Some dealerships do. A lot of them do. I like to do it. So there you go. So again, you can put it in those contact points or you can put it on the tips of the pads. Either way, you want to do that. Make sure it's lubed up. All right, so there's my caliper bracket. Everything's ready to go. So then I just put my bracket back on. You can notice it goes in the direction of the rotor, this curve here. And these slides are in the back here like that. You want these bolts to be nice and tight once they're in. Always start bolts by hand. Don't start them with the air tool especially, so that you know those threads are going in nice and smooth. Like for that one, for example, it felt like it was starting and then it wasn't. So you just kind of wiggle sometimes. Feel like it's starting, give a pull, make sure it's actually started and actually biting on the threads. And once I know that I got a good bite on the threads, I can come in with a ratchet or an air tool and tighten them up. And I can hit these, it's going to be loud. And then I'm gonna actually come in here and give it a nice snug pull myself. Make sure it's nice and tight. Using my breaker bar that you saw earlier. So my caliper's on, or caliper bracket, excuse me. Everything's lubed up. Now I'm going to put my pads back on. My hardware is everything's lubed up the way it was. So people always wonder about this little thing. This is called a wear indicator. It's sticking off the back. It starts to rub the rotor when this pad is too thin. Okay, and I'm going to put this back on. And typically, this is on the inside pad. So I'm going to slide that back in to both of those spots. And sometimes it'll fight you a little bit, like this one is. Sometimes you got to do top first, then the bottom, especially when you got some really rusty parts. This one's going to fight me here. There it pops. Same one with this one. This one actually happens to have a brake wear indicator on both, inside and out, but a lot of times they only have one on the inside. All right. Go. I'm going to put into this lube just a thin layer on the outside of that pad. I'm going to bring my brake caliper around, making sure I'm not twisting this hose right here. I'm going to let it fall the way it was when it came off. Slide it over here. And there's a flat spot on this slide on this particular car that has to go right in between that spot right there. You'll see how it has to slide right on there. Take your 2 small bolts. Again, always thread a bolt in by hand. By hand. Make sure my slots are nice and flat. And then these small bolts, I'm not going to use air tools. I'm going to use my ratchet. Try to get out of your way. Normally I'd be standing here, but I'm going to ratchet that in. You don't want to over tighten these bolts. These bolts are way too small for air tools. Again, if you're trying to break something free, normally I'm not going to stand here. I don't have much leverage. I'm doing this for the camera. But normally, I'm going to stand right over here like this so I can get right in front of it. But I'm trying to get out of your way. Nice and snug. Nice and snug. You see how the caliper moves nice and easy now? Last step, most important step of this whole thing is I'm going to lower this down. I'm going to get in the car. I'm going to pump the brakes until it's nice and firm. So that caliper comes back out. It's nice and tight. So you got to pump the brakes at the very last step and then add your brake fluid to the max line at the top, the master cylinder. But that's a good brake job for you. I think we basically covered it. Cool. All right, thanks guys. Thanks for listening. We on a roll. And actually, now that I think about it, I'm going to save this rotor, so I'm not going to... No, I am going to replace this one. Yeah, I'm going to hit it. Ready? It's going to be loud.